Okay, so we're ready to get started with some immune confidence here. The past years have really scared everyone when it comes to getting sick and being sick and how to manage their body's immune system. And so that's why I called this immune confidence because it's really important that I help you to understand how to be confident with how your body's functioning and will function and can function if we allow it to do what it needs to do. Here are some ways that we can go into this feeling a little bit stronger so that we can have a different experience and get stronger instead of weaker in the end. What is the immune system? So our body's immune system isn't a single system. It's an entire network of our entire body being able to work together and to function as a whole, to be able to communicate together. So anything that disrupts that communication, it could be a disconnect in this area that's leading to a disconnect over here. It's not, well, my immune system, just that an isolated part wasn't working. It's really a reflection of the system as an overall whole. Being sick is a sign of a working immune system. So that means that it's doing its job, it's doing what it needs to do, and I'll explain how that works as we go through. So I'm a visual person, so for me it's easier when I picture things. So we're going to start with some pictures. So picture, if you're a cook in a really, really messy kitchen and you've got stuff going on everywhere, and all of a sudden the pot on the stove starts to boil and overflow. And so you grab that, you put your hand on the pot on the stove, and then you're trying to read your recipes at the same time. And as you try to grab that, then you spill something everywhere. So it's just this chaos, right? And nothing's actually getting accomplished, but there's one heck of a mess that's being made. So what was the cause of the mess? Was it the stuff in the pot that caused the mess? No, it was not the stuff in the pot that caused the mess. So the stuff in the pot is the mess, but it's not the cause of the mess. So this is a great example of how to think about your immune system. So the mucus, the germs, the whatever it is, that isn't the cause. It is the mess. It's not the cause of the mess. So how do we learn how to work with our body in a way to understand what it's trying to say and identify what the difference between the cause and the mess and how to address both? So what factors might have been involved in that scenario? So, well, the counter wasn't really arranged to avoid spills, right? That was one problem. So think of that as your terrain, okay? When you're planting seeds, if you plant those seeds on concrete, you're not really going to grow anything, but if you plant it on fertile soil, that's where it's going to grow. Same thing whether it's when you come in contact with a toxin or maybe even a germ. If the terrain has to be such that that can fester and grow, and the terrain has to be such that it can expel those things efficiently, and that's the terrain. So those are the things that we want to happen. Well, the cook was also preoccupied with way too many things at one time. This is your body's trying to manage your blood pressure. It's trying to manage this. It's trying to manage your maybe a poor diet or maybe lifestyle factors that are working against you instead of for you. So that's when your body's involved in lots of different tasks. So that then it comes down to an overburdened system. Okay. Technique. Well, the lid is not going to stop it from overflowing. Okay. And that's where allopathic drugs come in. It's not going to stop what created that pot to overflow. It may muffle the overflow a little bit, but it's not going to stop, and it's certainly not going to address why it's overflowing and the root cause. Another factor is that there's just plain old too much stuff in the pot. So our body has to handle that too. There's just got too much going on, and the resources are spread way too thin. So that could be, your diet is a huge factor in that. The more we can clean up our lifestyle, our environment, and our diet, the easier some of these things are going to be for our body to manage. The heat was also too high. So that is our lifestyle. When we're working with a lifestyle that's extremely stressed and you're go, 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 and it never has the opportunity to rest and to heal, that's a perfect example. Okay. So what could we have done? Well, we could have added something to try to control the boiling. Okay, that's a possibility. We could have removed the pot from the burner. That's an idea. We could have tried that. We could have tilted a little bit, maybe released a little bit of pressure. We could have lowered the heat. But how many of these options would have really addressed the root cause? Well, the first one, if we had added something, well, that's going to alter the recipe, right? And then we're going to have to fix that problem. So we're going to fix one to create another. And we could even ruin the whole pot and it'll just have to be dumped. So that's a scenario where when we bring in antibiotics, that's what happens. So we alter the entire recipe of the body because it doesn't kill the bad bugs, or if it even was a bug, it could have been a toxin or whatever, virus. But it doesn't, it only kills the bad bugs. So if it wasn't a bug, it's not, now we're killing all of our good bugs and it wasn't even a bug to begin with. So we want to be really careful. We increase our risk of cancer when we take an antibiotic, and it could lead to much bigger things down the line. So that's not really the best solution. We could remove the pot from the burner. Well, if we do that and we remove it from the burner, well, that's going to take a couple of hands, a lot of focus, a lot of energy. And then while all of that is focusing on this pot, that leaves all these other functions in the body that need to be addressed, that need to have attention, that need to have resources, and they're not getting them. So that's a problem. So we don't really want to do that. So that we want to have enough so that the body can address everything it needs to address. And sometimes this is what we're doing too when we have surgery. When we have surgery, and then the body has to focus on healing that, and it's using all the resources for healing from the surgery and trying to address whatever we did with that. And it's just leaving a whole lot else going that's neglected and lacking of resources. So option C, tilting the lid, turning down the heat. Well, yeah, that might avoid a big spill, but the crappy contents are still trapped inside your pot. So it's still just a temporary solution. The root cause is still a problem. So what are some possible root causes? Well, the terrain. We could have strengthened the terrain a little bit. Our terrain, so that fertile soil is going to determine, well, what determines who gets sick and who doesn't get sick. You could have two people living in the same household. One people catch it, and the other person doesn't catch it. So we want to make sure that the terrain is staying to such that one, there isn't anything for those, if it is a germ or a bug, that there isn't anything for that to feed off of, right? So it doesn't have this perfect soil to grow in. So we want to make sure that it's unfriendly to those things, but yet very friendly to what we need. And we also want to make sure, that we're managing it in a way so that our body can move through that challenge. Okay, so the terrain is going to determine how long we're sick, how severe our symptoms are, and that's going to make a big difference in what we experience. So we can make sure that our terrain is nice and strong. So we do that with what we eat, how we fuel our bodies. Our genetics will determine some of that. And now we know so much about epigenetics, and we know how we can manage our genetics. We used to think that genetics were a death sentence, and well, that's my genetics. Those are my genes. And now we know otherwise. So now we know that there's so much power in that. Our lifestyle can make a big impact on our terrain. So we can strengthen that terrain so that it's unfriendly to what we don't want to hang around, and it can evacuate and eliminate what we want to leave. And then our environment. So it's kind of like a fish dying in a fish tank. If you have fish die in a fish tank and you just take the dead fish out and you put brand new fish in the same exact fish tank, they're going to die. So it's still going to be a problem. So making sure that the environment of the fish, the water in the tank, okay, so to speak, so your living environment is as clean as we can possibly get it. So limiting toxins in our life, whether it be chemicals, and this could just be as simple as cleaning products, in all these different areas. So making sure that we're cleaning up the environment, not just changing out the fish. Because when we do that, there's toxins that are still adding to the pot. So what are some opportunities that we have? Well, we have opportunities in our air. There's filters, filtration systems we can get, monitoring for mold, making sure that we're not mouth breathers, or breathing, especially when we sleep at night, sleeping with our mouth open, that's a problem. Shallow breathing. Our diaphragm is the biggest pump for our lymphatic system, which is a major drainage pathway for these things to drain. So when we're shallow breathing and we're not fully exercising that diaphragm, that is restrictive on our lymphatic system. Technology interferes with our immune system. So we want to always look for ways where we can protect ourselves when it comes to technology, how to minimize technology as much as possible. And then where we place the technology is really important, like not having a Wi-Fi router in our bedroom, for example, and things like that. Then our water, we want to obviously be drinking it. We want to make sure our daily intake is good, which most people do not have a strong daily intake for water. Eliminating plastic. If you're drinking out of plastic water bottles, not going to be a ton of help because you're adding a lot of toxins to the system with that water. Making sure that you have a good filtration system that's actually getting out everything that you need to get out of the water. So when we get sick, we don't realize that those symptoms are actually expressing in that healing phase. So you see this conflict active phase, and then you see a healing phase. So when the conflict active is happening, that's when we're running from the bear. That's when our body is in survival mode. It's not until it shuts down and it's not until, okay, we're safe, we're calm, that's when our symptoms express. So it's after a situation happens that we have the symptoms come about. So your symptoms is actually a healing phase. Now, if we're always in a healing phase, that's a problem because that means we're stuck there and we're not actually able to move through. And if we're never in a healing phase, if we're never getting symptoms, then that means that we're never actually finishing the conflict. So that means that our body's never getting to that place where it can heal, which means that just major things are building up long term. So we don't want to never get sick. And we also want to make sure that when we do get sick, that we can move through it quickly and smoothly. Because if you don't get sick, your immune system isn't working. It's there because when we have that overload, not just an outside invader, because that can show the same immune responses, we want it to be able to manage that. That's what its job is, to keep us alive and to keep us alive and well. And so that's what it's going to try to do. So it's got to do its job. So a burden overload can look like too many chemicals in our life. It can look like too much technology in our life without protection. It can look like too much stress. It can look like a lack of reserves. Maybe it's because of a poor diet or poor lifestyle that we're not ever accumulating those reserves that our body has to rely on. So what is your body trying to say when it gets sick? Well, it's trying to say, hey, there's junk in here and I'd really like to get it out. So I always think of, the Frozen song, Let It Go. Let it go, let it go. If your body accumulates mucus to expel junk. Same thing with mold, same thing with parasites. So that means it's feeding off of something. So whatever it's feeding off of, you need to let it go. So people will do like a parasite cleanse, or they'll do a candida cleanse, and they're never addressing what those things were eating. So that's a problem. We never want to do that before we address what it's eating. So it's always best, if you're going to do a cleanse like that, to do it with a professional like myself that can walk you through the whole process and not just kill stuff off. So that's important. Those symptoms could look like vomiting. It could look like chronic histamine release. It could look like colds and mucus. It can look like fevers. So your body uses that the same way that nature uses things like maggots and fungus and termites to break down and get rid of dead and things that need to be discarded. So 80% of your immune functions are in your gut. So it's really important to take care of your entire body. People don't think of your gut when they think of your immune system, but it's really important. It all works together. Just like your car runs on gas, you run on fuel. So garbage in, garbage out. So if your body isn't getting any fuel from what you're giving it, you might be hungry all the time. You might have lots of cravings, but that's a great red flag that you're not actually nutritionally satisfied. So make sure that you're satisfying those that fuel, that you're actually fueling your body. Think of your food and your lifestyle as a return on investment. So what's the cost of this in order for my body to be able to use it? Like if you sit down at, okay, that ginormous spaghetti dinner with the big ice cream sundae afterward. What is it costing my body to move all of that through this system, and what is it actually getting out of it as far as nutrients? So that's what we try and teach our clients, to identify that. And it's not to say that there isn't anything that you can never eat anything wasteful. But it means that if that is the exception and not the rule, and you're making sure that you're fueling intentionally in between, then it's not going to be so much of a burden on the system when you want to have the one-off treat. And then, there are ways to make treats that are healthier too. Same thing with lifestyle. If I want to, drink that 6-pack, what's that going to cost me, and what's that going to look like at the end? So always think of it as a return on investment. You've heard the saying, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When it comes to prevention, I like to think of it as building up reserves, because prevention is kind of misleading. It makes us think that in some way, shape, or form, we can prevent our body from coming into contact with toxins and germs and that kind of thing. And that's just not the case. We don't live in the Garden of Eden anymore, and it's just not realistic. So we can't really prevent those experiences, but we can control what reserves we have on hand for our body to utilize. So when that happens, it can do it swiftly, it can move through it efficiently, and we can come out of this, in a stronger way at the end of it instead of being weaker. So some of the ways you build up those reserves is fueling well, is getting intentional sleep, hopefully 8 hours a night, managing your stress really well, testing your zinc levels. Don't just go supplementing zinc. I know they told people to do that, but if you're over supplementing zinc, that's a problem. It's just as bad as being deficient in zinc. So I recommend a zinc test. It's really easy to do at home. 1 bottle is good for lots of tests, and you can use that to monitor, because in the next slide, I'll show you why. We'll talk more about that. Vitamin D, you want that at 100 minimum. Doctors will say, 30 is good when you test your levels and your blood work, but you really want that to be at 100. Mushrooms. I have it in my coffee. I have it in my tea. I have mushrooms in every way, shape, and form I can possibly get it. I have dried mushrooms that when I make a cup of herbal tea, I'll have, I'll stick a piece of the dried mushroom in there. So any way that you can get any kind of mushroom in your system, do it. It's extremely beneficial to your immune system. Next way to build up your reserve, a great way, is to balance your pH. Because guess what? This is gonna really help limit what your body has to deal with. So if your saliva, for example, is too alkaline, then that means that it's not killing off the bugs at that place. It's not breaking down, so it's not killing off your bugs where at that first point of contact. So that means things are going to get past there. Second, it means that it's not starting your digestive process in your mouth like it should with breaking down your food, which means that the stomach's going to have to do more work, and that's going to be an overburden. So then you're not going to be able to get the nutrients out of your food in the way that you should. So there's all these reasons. And then, your urine is a reflection of how well you're eliminating. Are things sitting and festering and rotting, or are they moving through the system in a nice way? So pH can really tell you a lot about your health and give you a good picture of what's happening on the inside. This is a picture, this whole slide is all about copper. So this is a great reason why you don't want to over supplement zinc. Copper is important for so many functions. It's just huge, and excess zinc will deplete your copper. Excess iron will deplete your copper. Excess zinc will also interfere with your absorption of iron. So there's all of these things. It's a delicate balance, and you don't want to just, it's just a supplement. It'll be fine. It's not going to hurt anything. I'll just take it. I mean, you can even, when you have that imbalance between zinc and copper, it can even lead to things like ADD, ADHD, aggressive behavior, that kind of thing. So these minerals all play an important role. So it's important to make sure they're in the right balance. Well, I'm sick, so now what? Meaning that you're starting to express symptoms. So one, you want to open up your drainage pathways. So this picture is a great visual of our primary drainage pathways and our secondary drainage pathways. So our secondary pathways are our skin, our sinuses, reproductive organs. Our primary, digestion, liver, kidneys, lymph, and lungs. So when something is expressing in your sinuses, for example, you're all stuffy and nasally and there's tons of mucus. It's trying to tell you that there's an overload somewhere deeper. So a lot of times people would be like, "Oh, can you give me that stuff you gave me? And it cleared up my sinuses." And it's like, "Well, that was actually for your liver, but sure, we can do that again." It's just nutrition for your liver to help clear up that backup to relieve some of the pressure that's coming out in those secondary pathways. So you always want to keep your drainage pathways open. Even if you kill the bug, you still need to drain it or the body remains toxic. So again, anything that's sitting in the system that can't be used is not a good thing to have laying around. You want to make sure that you're able to move it through. So drainage pathways are really important. Things like fevers, what's my body trying to say? Well, your body brings on a fever when it's trying calcium. Your body uses calcium to direct your immune system. So a fever is breaking down bone so that it can release calcium to direct your immune system. So a shortcut here, or I guess a way to support, is to supplement calcium lactate is a great supplement here. And that is going to give your body what it needs to do the immune function that it's trying to do, or manage the immune issue, without creating a problem. So when you just take Tylenol, for example, to turn the fever off, well, now your body can't do it by breaking down the bone, and you're not giving it what it needed with the calcium. So now it's just prolonging the agony of whatever it's trying to manage, and it's just making it a lot harder. So we want to speak the language. We want to understand what it's trying to say, and if we can support it and give it what it needs to bypass the need for the fever, even better. Herbals, there's lots of herbals, olive leaf, Essiac. Essiac is actually a great, there was a nurse that came up with this blend in Canada, and she was actually helping people cure their skin cancer with this. It's a really powerful blend of herbs. Cat's claw is another one, myrrh. These are all herbs that I use all the time. There's so many more, but these are just some ideas. Homeopathics, Energetics has a great line of homeopathics that I like to have on hand. We make customized homeopathics. If you're local to the office, you can come in and get a scan. We can make you a homeopathic specifically for what your body's working through right then and there. But it's hard to know which ones do I need when and how much do I need to take. So you can come in and we can do a scan, and it's going to help us to understand what's happening in the body at the time. We'll do muscle testing. This is a photo of my old office when I was in Jersey. And these are just some ways that your body will talk to you. But there are some general things that I like to tell people to have on hand. So my Fullscript dispensary, you can scan that code and join there. And you can go on there, and I tell people there's an immune kit on there. And these are just very safe whole food supplements that you can have on hand. And if you start taking them as soon as you start to feel something, a lot of times that really eliminates the need for anything further. There's some other samples of some things that I have on there in the dispensary that are great resources too. So if you're interested, you can always scan that QR code and join the Fullscript dispensary and start building up that immune kit. Start building up a medicine cabinet that can really, really help. So I'm going to stop recording now, and then we're just going to continue with the giveaway for those that are here in person. So thank you.